right. Hey, Skol Hoppers, welcome back, and thanks for joining us. We've got the distinct privilege of chatting with Dustin Baker tonight. Dustin writes over at Vikings Territory as well as creates content over at Vikes Now, and we're fortunate to be able to do this about once a month with him, and we're glad that he keeps coming back. So, Dustin, thanks for hanging out with us.
Oh, hell yeah. The last time we talked, it was like we're talking about a whole different activity because reasonable people, like all three of us, I think, pretty reasonable, thought, hey, this team will be pretty decent, 7, 10, 8, 9. We're getting ready for the big year, which is 2025, and we can table all those chats. The big year is right now. My goodness. But, yeah, I'm really excited to talk with you, gents. Let's do it.
Yeah, so I don't want to pump my chest too much, but I did walk into the season predicting, what did I predict, 11 wins?
Yeah, I thought you were nuts.
And I could see it. They had that look in their eye like, okay, man, yeah, good for you, 11 wins. I hope you're okay. I hope you're happy with that. But, I mean, now, I saw that you put something out today that you revised the win total, and it's more than 11 wins. So.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's one thing on my YouTube show. I very vividly, for almost every episode there in August, said 7 and 10 is my expectation. And in the comments, and I get it, it's the internet, they're like, hey, well, you thought this team was 7 and 10. It's like, well, what am I going to do? Just stick to my guns now and claim they're only 7 and 10? Of course not. They're 4 games up on this. Of course I'm going to revise it. I'd be a dipshit not to.
Absolutely. Even Stephen A. Smith, changes his mind from time to time. All right, well, I guess we can dive in a little bit. We came in with some topics here. Today, the Vikings, or at least KOC, kind of said that they're going to be opening up TJ Hockenson's window of his practice window. I think it's like a 3-week window they get. So with TJ Hockenson, when should we expect him back, and what kind of a difference will he make on this, star-studded team all of a sudden?
About 9 days ago, one of my guys messaged me, I should say one of my de facto sources, said Hawk back against the Rams. And I was like, oh, okay. We knew that the window would open. I think it's going to open Friday. But I think there was some momentum from some various Vikings outlets, websites that said, hey, he'll be eligible to come off week 4. And I think some of us thought oh, sweet, week 5, baby, London game. But I think that was way too optimistic. So I think they strategically opened the window, or will open the window this Friday, which makes the deadline, so to speak, the day after the Rams game. So my source, the primary source, is usually pretty right on these things, especially medical issues. He was the one that told me the night of that Hockenson had torn his ACL and MCL. So yes, I would expect him for the Rams game. I guess there's maybe a puncher's chance that he could be back against the Lions, but I think that them opening up this window on this Friday is a little telling. And then daydreaming about Hockenson back is one of the many delights of the 4-0 Vikings, because even when Jordan Addison was out, we'd get on shows like this, be like, who cares? After they beat the Texans and stuff like that, it's like, it'll be cool when Addison comes back. Look how much better we can be. And so that's where I'm at right now, where I'm like, Johnny Munt and Josh Oliver are doing a decent job. They're nowhere near the target hog that Hockenson is. So I am flabbergasted that the Vikings are 4-0. They haven't had Aiden Pace on the field. Dallas Turner was a non-factor because he was injured 2 weeks ago, only played 15 snaps. And it just doesn't matter who's on the field. They're so well coached and things are going so right that it's a non-issue for the personnel on the field. But when Hockenson comes back, I think that is really fabulous, because then you'll have your big 3 in Jefferson, Addison, and Hockenson. And we've already proven that, hey, if Jefferson sprains his ankle or Addison gets suspended or something, you've got the depth to compensate for it. So it's going to take the offense to new heights. And I don't know how much higher the offense could even go, because it's been so fantastic.
Yeah, especially this year when we finally have Jalen Naylor, who, I'm going to knock on wood, hasn't been, habitually injured all season so far. And it's a short season so far, 4 games. But, I mean, he's just going to pop open randomly because the big 3 are going to get all the targets and everything. So eventually we'll see a Jalen Naylor come in, and even if one of the other big 3 gets injured, he's going to pop in there too. So that'll be nice.
So with that kind of expectation that Hawkinson's going to come back, obviously that's exciting. There's been a lot of news floating around the last couple of days. Davante Adams wants out of Vegas. And the Vikings are a team that has been identified as one that he could potentially land at. I don't know how likely that is. But it seems like the Vikings have already hit a pretty high ceiling on the early season. Do they need to make any signings, any trades? And if so, Dustin, who would you recommend they pursue?
Okay. Well, on Davante Adams, the only way that I don't know if they can be in the sweepstakes because they wouldn't be able to offer draft picks until 2026 when all these other teams can offer picks from 2025. We spent a lot to get Dallas Turner. Bless his heart, we think it'll be worth it. So Davante Adams would just be an obscenely embarrassing slew of riches, or maybe they know that Addison's going to be suspended for sure for 3 games or whatever. But I just don't see that happening because we can be outbid. There is the Aaron Jones connection. I think he and Davante Adams are buddies, so I would certainly love it. The way the season is going, like, yeah, go ahead, why not? But in terms of guys they should sign, I keep coming back to Mason Cole. He's kind of a boring name. He played on the Vikings for, a year in 2021. Last year, he had a 60-something PFF with the Steelers. He's a free agent. And a knock on Garrett Bradbury, among many, depending on the week, is that his health hasn't been pristine in the last 2 seasons. And I would like them to have Mason Cole, who was a starter for the Steelers, on the roster. He should know the Vikings landscape and ownership. But that's just kind of ornamental. I'm sure Dan Feeney or Michael Juergens or whoever they trotted out there would do serviceable. Let's see. We're at an odd spot. One of the only times in my Vikings fandom of 3 decades where I can be like, we don't really need anybody. Like, screw the trades, keep all the draft picks, free agents, we don't need them. But the roster depth really suggests that the team is cooking. I would say, gun to my head, a acquisition that would be sweet. I've heard the rumors about Dexter Lawrence being on the trade rumor mill. I think it's just a Vikings fan thing to say, why not come here? A few things that have to go right there. Why would the Giants want to get rid of they have 2 really good players right now? Why would they want to get rid of him? The Vikings would have to be willing to donate probably a first rounder because Dexter Lawrence is only 26. He still has youth on his side. Now the Vikings draft pick could be, between 25 and 32. So who really cares if you sell that off? So you'd have to have the Giants wanting to play ball, trading him, the Vikings willing to donate a first rounder. And then the money would have to make sense. You'd probably either have to renegotiate his deal the moment he got here, or you'd have to clear cap space. But if there was a way to do this, I would trade the first rounder from next year for Dexter Lawrence, because in all likelihood, the Vikings are going to be shopping for an interior defensive lineman. And why not get a 26-year-old who's like the best nose tackle in football, a sure thing, rather than some dude from Michigan that you hope is good in 2027. So I would endorse that. Otherwise, I would look for, if you want to get deep into your trade bag, looking for any player, probably a corner, a CB that played for Brian Flores. Josh Fry and I talked about Jonathan Jones on the Patriots. He's been there since 2016. He's won 2 Super Bowls. The Patriots season is swirling down the tubes. They'll probably get Drake May in there before too long. But cornerback would be the only one where I would say, okay, Kwesi traded for so-and-so, that kind of makes sense. Right now, the hodgepodge of Byron Young, Shaq Griffin, and Stephen Gilmore. Gilmore, I love. They're doing fine, but one of those guys is going to get hurt, and I don't think it'll be season-ending. But we know from Mike Zimmer's old adage, cornerbacks always get hurt. So one of those guys is going to get hurt before too long, and Caleb Evans can probably fill in the bench. I think it would be cool to get a little extra depth in that instance, and then I don't think they need any offensive line help, because whenever Dalton Risner comes back, to me, that is your trade or your free agent acquisition, as Dalton Risner is in the house. So that's what I got for some potential names, and that's really just trying to have something to say, because right now, if they don't have any free agent moves or trades, I'll be like, well, yeah, they're 4-0. By the time the trade deadline's here, they could be 7-1? Who knows?
Yeah, it's really tough to identify weak spots on the roster right now. I think if I had to pick one, you might say the interior offensive line. And I like the idea of bringing in another center who's familiar with the organization. I think that's a smart move, especially considering Garrett Bradbury's health problems, and he gets bullied too. He kind of gets pushed around. So to see somebody that could maybe hold their own a little better would be encouraging for sure. But yeah, it's tough to kind of look around at this roster and go, yeah, we could get better.
Yeah, and I think as far as cornerback, there's a couple of guys in the practice squad too that could, if somebody got injured, would automatically they'd be the first men up to kind of fill the roster out a little bit. Like Fabian Moreau, I guess he's on the practice squad, and he's famous for, running with the ones like 12 hours after he signed with the team. So you never know. They might just be comfortable with where they're at roster-wise.
I would love to see Dwight McLaughlin get some snaps before too long. Yeah. He's on the active roster. But, yeah, that's a really good point on Fabian Moreau. I haven't thought about him since the Vikings just started winning games. It's like, usually you'll eye the practice squad and kind of look at it, and now it's like, I'm focused on the 4-0 in the regular season roster. But Fabian Moreau would be kind of like a makeshift acquisition as is, because a person like me has already forgot about him.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and then you got guys on the street. Like, I'm sure Duke Shelley wouldn't be
he plays for the Giants.
Oh, did he sign with the Giants? I didn't know that.
Yeah,
okay.
He played 15 snaps on special teams on Thursday Night Football.
Oh, wow. I guess I should have known that. Well, that's what we got Dustin for. All right. Well, this team, we're talking about it. We're kind of surprised. They're so good. Maybe we're too close to it. We've talked about how nobody really put too much into it. We thought 6, 7, 8. I thought 11, but however many wins. But at this moment, I'm surprised. I'm sure you guys are both surprised. What's the most surprising part about this Vikings team outside of obviously the wins?
My most surprised emotion, and this will feel a little bit redundant, so bear with me. When we were leaving the Houston Texans game, 27-point beatdown, the place was electric from like cover to cover. I remember walking out, telling my wife and her friend who comes to all the games with us, we've got to a point, like what we should have been doing that Monday morning is saying, damn it, we lost to the Texans. We didn't have Ivan Pace. We didn't have Dallas Turner. We didn't have TJ Hockenson. We didn't have Jordan Addison. I should have been bemoaning injuries. Instead, they were a footnote. They were an afterthought. Like, oh, cool. When Jordan Addison comes back, that'll be pretty spiffy. So I was higher on the roster depth this spring and summer than most, but I didn't think it was elite depth. I didn't think Camus, Grugier, Hill, when he comes in, there's no drop off whatsoever. Like he's making more plays than Ivan Pace. Like I can't believe we've hit a spot where it doesn't matter who comes in. And so it's a testament to Kwesi Mensa's careful construction of the roster over the last 3 seasons. I went back and read his quote. I think it was right at the start of the offseason, where he said that we have to thread the needle this offseason, but if we do it right, this is when the competitive rebuild will be finished. And I remember thinking, this is a bold son of a bitch to say this. We haven't even drafted a quarterback yet. We know Cousins is leaving. But what he has done has made this a Super Bowl contender in year 3, which is what exactly you want to happen when you have a new general manager rebuild a team. So from head to toe, the Vikings are deep, and it might just be the coaches know how to use these, average players. That's the only thing I can think of. That's the most surprising part. I think the other surprising part is that they have been able to fix the run game like that after it was so pitiful in back-to-back seasons, especially last year when Madison could get nothing going. Having Aaron Jones get 6 yards per touch takes us back to the Dalvin Cook days of his prime, 2020 and 2022. And that is the reason this offense is cooking, is because Aaron Jones keeps everybody else honest. If we had some moron who was getting 3 yards per carry, Sam Darnold would have to wind back and throw it 45 times, and he wouldn't be this good. This is the reason we're not talking about Justin Jefferson's yards. We're not talking about him breaking the receiving yard record anymore. We don't care. If you have a receiver who's going to potentially break that record, you're probably relying on him too much in the first place. So right now, Aaron Jones is like this complementary part to how Kevin O'Connell likes to play. We know in his heart of hearts he likes to throw the football. Mm-hmm. But when you have Aaron Jones softening everything up, and then when Ty Chandler comes in, he's almost as effective. It makes everything so much more efficient, where Darnold has time in the pocket. He can feed his wide receivers. So I really commend them in year number 3, finally fixing this ground game, because I was paranoid. I told you guys a couple months ago, O'Connell would go on my personal hot seat if he couldn't fix this rushing thing, because no coach is ever going to do anything if you can't be at least average running the football.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and that's one reason I was kind of deflated a little bit when Cam Akers didn't actually sign with the Vikings. It's like, oh man, this running back room, I think I even said it to you, Dustin, there's a lot of bodies in the room. They're not lacking running backs. It's just outside of Jones and Chandler, like there's not really anybody. And I'll be the first one to admit that I was wrong, at least so far, that I didn't expect anything from Chandler Jones this year. I figured, older running back, he had his day, but he's going to get injured. Maybe we'll get a couple. I think at one point I said we'll get one 100-yard rushing game out of him, and he'll look good once or twice, but then it'll quickly be done. Granted, we're 4 weeks in. That could still be true, but so far he's proving me wrong like crazy, and I'm okay with that.
What we kind of forgot when we made that theory, which is totally fine. For years, Packers fans bitched about not using Aaron Jones enough. They really had him on a pitch count for his whole career there. They always had a number 2, whether it was A.J. Dillon or who was the dude before him? I can't remember his name now. But they always had somebody. Like for his career, Aaron Jones averages 12 rushing attempts per game. I think when you see somebody as productive as him, you think, oh, okay, well, he's going to be 30 in December. The tread on the tires is totally cooked. But he was used sparingly in Green Bay compared to a bell cow running back. And I think we're seeing the fruits of that. Like Dalvin Cook averages 17 carries per game in his career. Aaron Jones is 12. You might say, oh, that's 5. That is a massive amount over 7 seasons. So I think we are the benefactors. This is really sweet of the Packers not using Aaron Jones to his fullest, and then just a byproduct later in his career is like go play for the purple team and then have him come beat you at Lambeau Field. It's just so wonderful, and it makes things all the better that he is like this ultimate fan favorite, like that engages everybody. It's always happy. There's always some awesome story revolving around him. Whether he's got something in the Players Tribune, or he's doing the bank vault, or he's got the sombrero on, or he's giving a press conference. It's like the type of thing you want to have in your culture, in your locker room, like bees to honey.
Yeah.
That letter that he wrote, kind of an open letter to Packers fans, that was pretty cool too. I really enjoyed reading that.
That was the first time in my life, I'm going to be 41 next week, that I've opened up a thing of Packers content and not been like, why, I don't need to read this shit. And so I read it and I was like, God, this is really cool. Now I read it because it was Aaron Jones who wrote it, but usually I'd see like if what's his name, if Jordy Nelson or whatever would have written that, I would be like, yeah, I don't care about this. But so yeah, kudos to Aaron Jones for just being this ultimate stand-up guy.
I think another really surprising part about this Vikings team is it hasn't really been like a one-man or a two-man show. It's been a team effort all the way around. Like every week on the defensive side of the ball, it seems like a different guy is leading the team in tackles or getting a handful of sacks. Like I think it was the Texans game that it was Blake Cashman and gosh, I'm blanking on all these names now, but it's just Grugier Hill. He had that interception last week against the Packers. It just seems like there's all these different dudes stepping up, even on the offensive side of the ball. We've already mentioned, Justin Jefferson's not breaking any receiving yards records. Sam Darnold, I think he found 8 different receivers in the first half against the Packers. So I think that's another surprising aspect and also a really awesome aspect of this team is that the love is being spread and everybody's contributing, and they seem to have just infinite amounts of depth on both sides.
It kind of feels like the 2017 roster in that regard, like that roster, because the defense was so good, like all the way through the season, like you'd be like, oh hell yeah, Ben Gideon, he's a beast. Like every guy on there, Sendejo, oh he's a monster, top 10. Like every guy was uplifted by everything around them. So I completely agree with you that it's always somebody new, like Shaq Griffin getting the pick 6 and almost scoring a touchdown. Like every guy is stepping up. And the other part that made me, Evan, think of this, or what you said made me think of this, is nothing is fluky or accidental or, oh my God, we have to have the weirdest fumble on the goal line by Josh Allen in NFL history. Like nothing feels like it doesn't feel like it has to come down to the wire and then maybe the other guy will miss a field goal and then the Vikings are going to get lucky because they're going to have this perfect pass that'll only be caught 15%. No, most of the wins are dominant, and they were cruising in that direction against the Packers until the damn punt return muff. But we lived through a season not long ago where almost every win was like, oh, no way. I'm glad you went to that game, man, because that's the best game we've seen this season. Like every week was like that. And this year, it's the opposite. It's like, oh, we're going to see the Texans. We're going to crush them by 27. Oh, you're going to Green Bay. You'll be up 28-0 in the second quarter. So all of these wins seem convincing, and we don't have to have – I mean, this is why the Vikings are the best team in football per DVOA right now. And in that season when they were 13-4, I'd pull up DVOA. I think they finished like 26th. The 26th best team in football per DVOA in 2022, and they had a 13-4 record. That's how – wonky that season was. It's cool to finally find a club that is dominant, and it's just so strange that outside of Austin's 11-6, nobody could really see it coming. Like there wasn't. I can't think of anybody, high school friends, pundits that are like, oh, these guys they're going to the NFC Championship. No, it was the fringe of society like Austin who thought they could hit 11-6.
I would.
What's that?
I was just going to add one more thing. Like, I would agree with you on like 98% of that, Dustin. Mm-hmm. However, I think there are a few fluky things that have happened, like the field goal that doinked in for Will the Thrill, and then against the Packers, there's the field goal that doinked out. Like, there does seem to be this element of things just are bouncing the right way for the Vikings as well. Not everything, but in those key moments.
My favorite thing about the doink from Will Reichard is when you're kicking 59-yarders, you're supposed to doink the crossbar. You're not supposed to just for to show off hit like this upper crust of the goalpost. So that was so awesome. I couldn't believe it. Like it's like, oh, so we got a dog like that can just I'll bang it through, shimmy it through from 59, have it hit the upper part of the goalpost. My goodness.
Yeah, and I wonder if he was slightly inaccurate on that because he really tried to give it all the leg he could. Yeah. Because, man, that had the distance for, like, I wonder, does ESPN or NBC still do that? Like, it would have been good from this far out. Like, I wonder what that kick really would have been good for, but it seemed like it could have been a 70-yarder. Yeah. Just by, it almost didn't, like, it almost went above the crossbar. Like, that's insane. So, I keep going back because the last time the Vikings started off this good was Sam Bradford's one full starting year, 2016, when they started off, was it 5-0?
Yep.
And then
week 6 bye week, dun.
Famously ended 8-8 and missed the playoffs. But is it that lack of consistent flukiness? Yeah, Evan, you are right. There have been a couple of like weird things that have gone the Vikings' way, but it hasn't been a consistent flukiness like 2022. Is it that lack of consistent flukiness that is making this year different than 2016? Like, do we have more hope, I guess, is what I'm trying to ask.
Yeah, we have the hope for certain. Now, no, there aren't many Vikings fans that I know that will be absolutely shocked if they just face plant, like starting this Sunday or something. We'll just be like, oh, yeah, of course that's going to happen. But I don't necessarily endorse a fear that's close to 2016 because that team could not run the football whatsoever. Adrian Peterson tore his meniscus, sound familiar, and he missed most of that season. They leaned on Jerick McKinnon and Matt Asiata. Bless both of their hearts. It didn't really work. That was like the worst rushing season in Vikings history per efficiency. So they were getting away with stuff on defense and the special teams during that 5-0 start. Kick return touchdowns. I think Marcus Sherrills had a punt return. I think that very first game against the Titans in 2016, they had 2 defensive touchdowns. So we were riding a lot of momentum. Like, that team was really good for 5 weeks, but it didn't have all facets. Like, you didn't know that once Bradford was coming into the huddle, like, all right, we're going to go down and score. He's going to hit Addison. He's going to hit Jefferson. You didn't have that guarantee in your bones. This team, so long as Darnold doesn't turn into a pumpkin, which I don't think he will, they're just more complete. And they'll have some of those breaks, like Reichard getting the goalpost on a 59-yarder. But the 2016 team, I think, collapsed because the borrowed time of good luck on defense and special teams was coming to an end. And I think all 3 phases of the Vikings enterprise would had to have been lucky up until now. And I don't feel that at all. When I'm watching these games, I'm like, man, we're good, man. I just can't believe it. We'll get a real test whenever it is. Some team is going to slap the Vikings in the mouth in the first quarter and get up 14-0, and we're going to be like, ew, we have to play from behind. That is when we'll know if this team can compete with the Chiefs in the Super Bowl, or probably the 49ers deep in the NFC playoffs. They had a little brush with adversity when the Packers started getting on their bullshit on Sunday, but what I want to see, and it's weird to endorse this, it's kind of like I want to see Will Reichard miss a field goal soon. I don't want I don't want it to be impeccable into the playoffs, and I want him to be human. It was cool to see the Packers come back to an extent because the Vikings got a chin check. They got busted in their chops and got a bloody lip and said, all right, now we got to go finish this thing. Sooner or later, some team, maybe the Lions after the bye, is going to jump out, and then we're going to figure out if Darnold can play from behind because we know he can play with a lead.
Well, I hope it's not against the Lions, because that's the one game I'm going to get to go to this year. So hopefully that's just another blowout win for the Vikings. And Skol Hoppers, really quick, Dustin basically just rehashed one of his entire recent articles on VikingsTerritory.com, where I asked the one question that all of Vikings Nation is asking right now. Why is this not 2016? So Skol Hoppers, friendly reminder, go check out Vikings Territory. Check out Vikes Now. Obviously, Dustin does really good work, and you did write that one. Okay, I was really concerned for half a second that you weren't the one to write that. Yeah. But either way, it's still Vikings Territory. So I think we have a few more questions, if that's all right.
Yeah, I've got one here, and we could maybe kind of go around the horn here and kind of give our thoughts on this. But we've already kind of alluded to all of this. Dustin, you did a great job of kind of summarizing the last several years of Kwesi Adofo-Mensah as GM. He's done a really good job, I think, of building this roster and getting the Vikings to a point where they can be really competitive. Kevin O'Connell has looked to me like a Coach of the Year candidate. He's called really, really good games. He's put Sam Darnold in a lot of really good positions to make good plays. And Sam Darnold himself has looked really good. And Sam Darnold has started to garner some attention when it comes to J.J. McCarthy. What do the Vikings do moving forward? Do they keep Sam Darnold and let J.J. sit? Do they just move on from Sam Darnold and hope that J.J. is just as good? Do they do some sort of in-between? So maybe what we could do is go around the horn and make a prediction. Who gets extended first? Kwesi, KOC, or Sam Darnold, and why?
All right, I can start. I told you guys this was going to happen, that Sam Darnold was going to play too well, that we were going to have debates about Are you going to be pro McCarthy or pro Darnold? I didn't think he'd play this good, but I swore I said on every show that I was on, that was my bold prediction, was we're going to line up on fault lines because Darnold is too good to bench. And here we are. Prediction. So this isn't what I want. Prediction would be that Kevin O'Connell is first, but if they wait until the offseason, it would be a package deal with Kwesi Adofo-Mensah. If they can get into the postseason, I think that is the the bar that they would clear to get an extension is getting into the postseason because they weren't supposed to. Odds makers said you guys are going to win 6.5 games. Darnold, my goodness, that's going to be a debate. It depends on how far they get in the playoffs. Knowing how the Vikings do things, I think they will find a way to hedge the bet and have both guys. It'll get on my nerves because unless he gets to the Super Bowl, I'm ready to go to JJ McCarthy. Sam Darnold, if he gets the Vikings to the NFC Championship and plays like a baller in that game, he's going to get like $40 million from the Titans or the Raiders or somebody's. And if the Vikings take the plunge on that, we are right back to where we were talking about is Kirk Cousins worth this money. And I have the utmost faith in J.J. McCarthy that I don't think there would be a huge dip between Darnold and the upside of McCarthy. I know McCarthy will take years to get into his prime. But knowing how O'Connell is so loyal to his players, I guess that I bet you they figure out a way to do both, which is have them both back, and then you basically, having your cake and eat it too. I'm not excited for an offseason of Darnold and McCarthy, and I would rather McCarthy just get the nod, but I totally understand it, especially if Darnold tunnels deep into the postseason. I don't know if they would, if they lose in the wild card again or something, I don't know if he would have that much sizzle around him. What do you guys think?
Well, Dustin, I was going to ask, and we can come back to this question, the original question, but I was going to ask, because I'll say it, I'm in the camp of, at this moment, I'm definitely intrigued by re-signing Sam Darnold. And you kind of answered it a little bit, but what is the can't turn back from here moment where it's like, well, now we have to sign Sam Darnold? Is it a Super Bowl win or anything less than that, then we just let Sam Darnold, get his 40-50 somewhere else? Or is it the NFC Championship game? Where does he need to go for Dustin Baker to say, I need him to come back?
So again, I will pound this home. This is all about money. If Darnold wants to come back next year for 15, 20 million, great. Yeah, let's do it. But he's going to be able to parlay this. This was the plan, I think, from him all along, was why he told San Francisco, no, I can probably go start for a year in Minnesota with a quarterback whisperer. So for me to say all of that cap space that all of us have talked about, that would all go to Sam Darnold. And you'd have to clear all kinds of other caps, like contracts, the void years, to get money for free agency in 2025. If they get there and win the Super Bowl, I mean, I will give him my house, and I don't really care what the Vikings do after that. I will just be happy. I still can't get friends who are Broncos fans who are just bemoaning. Oh yeah, they suck. I'm like, you had it fine. Stop bitching. For $40 million, probably getting to the Super Bowl, I might be different than your viewers. I trust Kevin O'Connell to groom JJ McCarthy. And I think McCarthy can get us back to that standard within a year or three. I would love Sam Darnold to be a part of this team indefinitely, but he's not going to be the first guy that just becomes a humanitarian and throws 40 touchdowns he might be on his way to now. What would you do, Austin, if he face plants in round one of the playoffs?
So I just said that I'm definitely, as of this moment, very intrigued by the idea of keeping him. I'm usually go for the sure thing than go for the first round draft pick.
Oh, okay.
But if he were to, if it was solely based off his performance and he came out and did what Kirk Cousins did in 2022 against the Giants, then, that's okay. We let him walk. He earned his paycheck. Thank you for a really fun season. Because then it's like, all right, now we got this JJ McCarthy, who is a bona fide championship winner. And again, like you just said, KOC is the quarterback whisperer. For me, though, if Darnold is the reason that on the field reason that the Vikings make a deep playoff run, and who knows? I mean, Joe Flacco did it, and he, was elite for the Ravens, and they won a Super Bowl. If Sam Darnold does something like that, and if they win the Super Bowl, I'd be really hard pressed to say, okay, thanks, goodbye. I would want them to absolutely re-sign him because, yeah, you say J McCarthy could get to that same level in 1 to 3 years, which you're probably absolutely right. JJ McCarthy is an awesome quarterback from what we've seen in college. But this team, if it has a Super Bowl window, maybe that window closes because of the defense and not the quarterback play. But if you can keep it together for a couple more years, I'm not saying give Sam Darnold a 10-year contract. I'm saying eventually we do still go to J.J. McCarthy. But if they were to go to or win the Super Bowl, I'd want to run it back for at least 1 to 2 more seasons with Sam Darnold, if possible.
And then we would do the Packer thing that some have endorsed is like just tell McCarthy like you will be the guy. It's just not going to be go read Jordan Love's book, go read Aaron Rodgers' book. Like there's precedent. I think that's probably what we'd have to do. It would just be so weird. Vikings never do that. But yeah, I could get behind that. It's just that free agency will be a big splat because Darnold will have taken that. And I mean, I guess they can stretch it out.
Yeah, they've kind of got the core signed right now. Like we talk about, free agency would be done. Like you're not signing some of the guys that you signed this past offseason. But as of right now, you got Van Ginkel for at least one more season after this year, right? You got Grenard for, I think he signed a 4-year contract. You locked up Justin Jefferson. You locked up Darisaw, which we were all kind of surprised by how quickly that deal got done. That could be a huge blessing in disguise that we're not talking about. Oh, crap, we got to save money for Darisaw now. Like, those guys are already locked up. That core is already locked up. So, I mean, if Darnold is the guy that gets us there, then you can get there with the core. You can keep that window open for as long as possible, especially when you think about guys like Grugier Hill, who is like a $1 million a year guy who all of a sudden his first play got an interception. Like, it seems like the coaching staff can get stuff out of, these regular dudes, like you just said. One caveat would be if Flores left, and then we don't know what the defense is doing. If the team fell apart this year, then you don't sell it to the farm for a flashy quarterback.
That's actually a really good point. And I think he might be a guy that we left off of this list of, who do we extend? Obviously, if he gets a head coaching nod, I think all of us would expect him to pack his bags and go wherever he gets that opportunity. But yeah, Brian Flores is a very big part of this 4-0 success that we've experienced so far. On the Sam Darnold thing, I would say I'm definitely a have your cake and eat it too kind of guy as well. Like, I would love to see him stick around if he continues to be as successful as he's been through 4 games, and let JJ continue to develop behind him. And I think if those are the 2 guys going into the 25 season, I think you let now I'm blanking on his name. Nick Mullins. You let Nick Mullins go. Or maybe he's your emergency practice squad QB3 kind of guy. But JJ's healthy, you elevate him to that QB2. And that's kind of where I sit on this. But I think if I were to extend one of those 3, the initial 3 that I started this topic on, I think Kevin O'Connell is already deserving of that extension. I don't know how coaches' contracts are dealt out necessarily, and honestly, I don't know the full details of his current contract. But if we look back on what he's done in just a few seasons, he made the playoffs his first year, and last year he was a really good coach through some really difficult circumstances, losing his starting quarterback, losing arguably the best wide receiver in football, and making do with, some kind of hodgepodge players that we picked up from different places. Those Pasternak games were really fun to watch. So I think now that he's got his quarterback, He's got the offensive weapons back. Kevin O'Connell, like I said earlier, is really deserving, I think, of the coach of the year already, 4 games in. And if the Vikings keep pace with what they've done, to me, he's kind of a shoo-in for that award. And I think that elevates him to the top of my list for an extension.
Yeah. I guess, so Dustin, I have one last question for you. Yeah. We don't have to belabor it, but I just kind of came up with it after one of the questions earlier. We're all surprised, fans and media and everybody, the whole world's surprised by the Vikings and their performance so far. And again, they're 4 games in. This whole thing could go south and they could lose every other game continuing on. I don't see it, but they look really good. So everybody's surprised. Do you think on some level, Kwesi, KOC, the whole coaching staff, do you think they're surprised or are they just status quo? Like, you got to think, like, at some point, like, you got to think, holy cow, I didn't expect Sam Darnold to play this good, or dang, the defense is really great. Like, do they just know that they were going to be this good, or are they just as surprised as we are?
All right, so I don't know if if head coaches look at the schedule and think, all right, we'll be 3-1 by week 4, and then like we do. Bryant McKinney says that players do. I don't know if coaches do. I think that they would certainly tell you that they expected some semblance of this success, but the only undercover advantage they have is they would have been able to see Sam Darnold a lot sooner than we did. So as soon as they got him into minicamp, or O'Connell will infinitely be better at being a head coach than we ever will be. And if he was able to see in the tape, like, God, this guy is so good, I know he can win in my system. Perhaps they knew that Darnold would make this team this good, and then when they got to the spring and summer, we're like, holy crap, this guy is the real deal. You remember, you look back now, Cameron Bynum in June was talking about winning the Super Bowl. I remember laughing while I was writing the article. I was like, oh, this guy's rich, man. And so the players were chirping about it all summer. Like, yeah, we think this is a Super Bowl contender. And it's like, no, you don't. You don't have to lie to us, fellas. So I bet they knew that they were going to contend for the NFC North. I don't know if they would have said, oh, yeah, we're going to be 4-0 through this murderer's row of opponents. The Vikings have the 3rd hardest schedule in the NFL, and they are making it look like they have the 3rd easiest schedule. On a couple of our episodes, we talked about that. If the Vikings can just get to the Indianapolis Colts game, maybe 3-5. If they're feeling frisky, 4-4, because then the schedule gets easy, and it looks even easier now that we have a month of football in the books. You have the Colts, who look mid, the Titans, who look like shit, the Jaguars, who look like shittier, the Cardinals look right in the middle of, they could be fun. The Falcons, to me, look beatable. The Bears look like shit. So the schedule is going to get super navigable, and so I'm excited that all of these things have happened, like, hey, the roster is deep. Oh, the run game is fixed. All of the fun stuff has happened against a gauntlet of murderer's row opponents.
Yeah. That very, very true points. Evan, you got anything else?
No, that just makes me really excited to watch the rest of the season.
Let's go, yeah.
I want to say one more thing, talking about if I'm forced to warm up to McCarthy or Darnold for 45, 50 million, and then McCarthy, because he was so damn young. But let's say we're going to do this Darnold thing for, another season. By the time we'd ask for McCarthy in 2026, he would be younger right now than Michael Penix is in Atlanta. That's how young McCarthy is. Like, he turned 21 last January. So let's say the Vikings wrap their arms around that plan and they convince McCarthy, don't get disgruntled. You're going to be our guy no matter what. You're going to sit for another year on top of this. he would take the football in the huddle at age 23. And that's not like some big sin, like, oh my God, I had to wait till I was 23. Most quarterbacks that come out are either 22 or 23. So it's just another thing that works out beautifully is McCarthy was like the youngest quarterback in this draft. And if we're forced to have this situation, I was like, well, damn, Sam Darnold's an MVP, so we have to keep his ass. We can convince McCarthy because he's so young to wait around until he's 23.
Yeah. I guess the only thing I hate about that hypothetical situation is, in theory, if it's 1 or even 2 more seasons with Darnold, then by the time you're going to J.J. McCarthy, he's already pretty pricey at that point.
Oh, yeah.
And then you got to make a decision real quick if, like the Packers had to do with Love, it wouldn't be 1 season, I don't think, but it'd be real quick that if you're going to re-sign the guy, and you don't re-sign franchise quarterbacks for cheap anymore.
Yeah.
Not that you ever could, but the expensive looks way more expensive than it ever has, and it'll just keep getting higher. So that's the only thing I don't love about that hypothetical situation.
Well, that's the reason I was ready for McCarthy if his meniscus was intact. I was ready for him to play this year is because you got 5 years to get this right when the quarterback is guaranteed to be cheap. And then when you start chipping these years off, like, oh, meniscus is bad. Oh, we're going with Darnold for a year 2. Then you got to hurry up and win in 3 years because McCarthy will probably be the first $70-75 million quarterback by the time that comes around.
Could be. That's the way the timeline's looking out. All right, Dustin. Oh, sorry, Evan. What?
I would just add one more thing on that. I think that's what makes the Sam Darnold situation so sneaky interesting is because he's also pretty young.
Yeah.
We're not talking about a 30-something-year-old Kirk Cousins. We're not talking about Joe Flacco coming off of the bench for the Colts this last weekend when Anthony Richardson went down. We're talking about a relatively young, 27 years old and still has a lot of life in him, quarterback. And so I think that's why the debate is so hit or miss. Like there's not a clear answer which one is better at this point. And Sam Darnold is playing really, really well. So
Yep. All right, Dustin, we really, really appreciate every time you come on. We love having you on. I really love this groove of, every few weeks or a month that you come on. It's great. Is there anything you want to plug before we wrap anything up?
Nope.
Sounds great. Yeah, Skol Hoppers, don't forget, VikingsTerritory.com, Vikes Now. Go check out Dustin and all his stuff.